across the fence, a gorgeous display of traditional and modern quilts made by Vermonters. It's all part of the upcoming Champlain Valley Quilt Guild's 33rd Annual Quilt Show. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. The three-day quilt show kicks off this Friday at the Champlain Valley Expo in Essex Junction. And today we're going to get a preview of the diversity of quilts and quilters that will be on display during the show. To get started, I'm joined by two members of the Champlain Valley Quilt Guild, Sue McGuire and Laura Clements. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks.
Now we're going to get to lots of quilts here, but Laura, why don't we start by talking a little bit about the Champlain Valley Quilt Guild?
Well, the Guild was founded in 1979 and had just about 15 members, and now we have almost 150 members in the Guild. And the Guild serves to really promote an interest in quilting in both the members and in the community as well. And so we meet once a month, and from September to June, and we have monthly programs and workshops and challenges. And you know, one of the things that the Guild has done over the many years is also create a lot of quilts that have been donated to local community organizations. And this year, as you mentioned, we're working on our 33rd quilt show. The shows are every 2 years now, and this year's show is entitled All That Jazz, and it starts on Friday, October the 21st, and it goes through Sunday, October the 23rd. And it's held at the Champlain Valley Expo. And this year we have two very special exhibits. The first is an exhibit put together by the Vermont Modern Quilt Guild. And another exhibit is quilts that are all done by Carla White. Carla's a quilter that's local here to the Burlington area.
Wonderful.
So if you'd like more information on the Guild, you can go to www.cvqg.org, or you can find us on Facebook at Champlain Valley Quilt Guild of Vermont.
That's terrific. Well, let's get to some styles of quilting. Now, Sue, you've been a Guild member for over 25 years. Tell us a little bit about traditional quilts.
Well, traditional quilts in the old days were all done by hand. They were done with hand stitching and hand cutting with scissors and things like this. This is an example of one of those time frames. And this happens to be fabric that was done in the 30s. And this is a more modern version, one done by me with stars, that's using reproduction fabric from that same 30s time frame with these little motifs that you can see. These are threads and these are stars and all. And so we're using some of the same techniques, although we use some different tools. We use rotary cutters, we use sewing machines, but it's very similar to what we used to do in the old days, or our grandmothers and great-grandmothers did. This is another example of one done by Lorraine Hoffman that is of a traditional style. It's more set on point, which means instead of being squared blocks, they're on the diagonal, but very similar in terms of having setting blocks or squares or having sashing between the blocks, and using some prints that you would consider fairly traditional in that way, and more the subdued colors as well.
Can I ask you a question? How long would it take to make something like this? Because I just see hours and hours of work, which is what makes them so special.
It is a lot of hours, and most of us don't keep track because we do a little piecing here and we do a little quilting there. But you might have, say, 200 hours in some quilts that are bed size, and some of these aren't as bed size, they're more like throws. This one is another style completely. It's of the Amish quilts, and Amish quilters always tended to use solid colors. So this is trying to be, Karen Abrahamovich did this, calls it not exactly Amish because it's not one of their traditional designs, but it's in their style. And you can see she's done some lovely machine quilting on it that by the Amish would have been done by hand, but she's done by machine.
Now there are actually, I guess, 3 layers, as I understand, to a quilt?
That's right. There's the top layer that you do by piecing, and that nowadays we do most of that by machine. And then you would sandwich it and pin it with some batting in between and a backing on the bottom. And then the actual quilting is what you do through all 3 layers.
Oh, okay.
And then you finish it off in the edge with a binding.
Great.
And this one is also done by Karen Abrahamovich, and it's called Stars in a Midnight Sky. And
that's
again,
stunning.
It's very much in today's style of featuring the quilting that's done on it, because the lovely machine quilting that people do nowadays, you can add so much more to the quilt than just what the piecing does.
I just can't get over the different varieties of of quilts.
Yeah,
What have we got here?
So this is also, like Sue said, a quilt that transitions a little bit from traditional, which is reproduction fabrics and a pieced block in the middle, but it's surrounded by a more contemporary fabric and done in sort of fall colors. And then this is, again, fall colors, fall inspired, but very simple blocks, full blocks, and these blocks here are called half square triangles. And the use of the dark with the white is, again, a very traditional way to highlight certain parts of the quilt. And finished off with a binding.
Now, you brought along some examples, too, of what's known as updated traditional styles.
Exactly, yeah. So quilts like this one here, made by Carla White, this is called fuchsia. And so Carla used a technique here on these blocks. You can see the outline of the blocks, which are set on point, like Sue mentioned.
Okay.
And these blocks here are made by a tradition called paper piecing, where you use a piece of paper to help you put the seams together and get that really nice, crisp, precise block. And then she makes it much more contemporary with certainly the use of colors, which have gone from, you know, traditional muted colors to nice bright pinks and magentas. And she's got a very updated way of doing the stitching on this, again, with these beautiful waves and feathers all throughout the quilt.
It's incredible.
And another example of the sort of an updated traditional is our raffle quilt here. And every year the guild, several very talented guild members get together and make a quilt. And the sales of the tickets throughout the course of the year help us fund the programs that we run. And so in December there'll be a lucky winner of this beautiful quilt here, which is called Midnight Stars. And so, again, the use of a star block is a very traditional type of a quilt block style, but the way it's set and the way it's done on this dramatic black background with this beautiful machine stitching here really brings it into more of a contemporary quilt.
That's something. What else have we got here?
And that's pretty, yeah, that's pretty much it for sort of an updated style.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, let's move on now
traditional.
to modern quilts. And joining me now is Anya Byam, who is the president of the Vermont Modern Quilt Guild. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Now, the Vermont Modern Quilt Guild is just a couple years old?
It is. We started meeting to see if we wanted to become an actual guild in 2014. And so then January 2015, we officially became a guild under our National Modern Quilt Guild. The National Guild actually formed in 2009 as a way to answer modern quilters' need for actual in face-to-face meeting. A lot of times modern quilters were just sort of communicating online using Flickr and posting pictures, and they really wanted to create real life community that a normal guild, traditional guild would have. And since then they are now have 170 chapters.
Wow.
They've gone international. And the Vermont Modern Quilt Guild is the first one in Vermont.
Well, that's fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between traditional and modern quilts.
Sure. I mean, first with modern quilting, it is quilting. It is what traditional quilting is. It's the same process.
Yep, three pieces and so forth.
Exactly. The piecing, the backing, the batting. It's really more of an aesthetic. Like with any art form, it is what appeals to you. So there are quilters who are more attracted to the modern side versus traditional.
You have an example of that.
Yeah, so this is like a traditional, this is your log cabin, like sometimes this is like the very first block you would make. And this is in the traditional fabrics and style. And then this is what would be considered a more modern version.
Oh, okay.
And it really, it's the exact same block, but the way you use the colors creates a more modern aesthetic.
And you've got some more examples here, too. They're
We
beautiful.
do. And just a few of the other characteristics of modern quilting. It is, oftentimes, they always say modern quilters love to use solids, and some do. I love to use solids, but that's not a hard and fast rule, but oftentimes they're more graphic. There's a lot of negative space, meaning the background, which is not considered the pattern, is utilized, as well as the quilting is different.
Okay.
So the first few quilts are by Carla White, who was featured previously as well. And this is just an example of a small size quilt. That quilting doesn't have to be a full size quilt. This was a challenge she did of using black and white and just one other color. So she has a little pink accent, and it's her little peep of spring coming. This is based on a traditional block, New York Beauty, but she has put it into much more bold, bright colors, which gives it a much more modern feel.
Great.
Carla's next piece.
This is crazy. I love this.
I love this. She started off making hexagons, but they're no longer hexagons. She turned them into circles, and she also embellished this with amazing quilting, but as you can see, there's sparkles, there's jewels. So it actually crosses the line from traditional to modern to art quilts.
And let's just hold it up all the way because it's got a really different
yes, and it's not the traditional shape as well. So she has really pushed the lines on this one. It's
fantastic.
Not your mother's quilt, right?
Right, but I love it.
This is also Carla's, and this was started in a workshop with Jackie Gehring, which is she's a modern quilter, but Champlain Valley Quilt Guild brought her in to do a workshop, and this was her falling sticks. It was a technique that Jackie Gehring taught.
Terrific.
This quilt is by Karen Abrahamovich. And I should say Karen and Carla are both dual members, meaning they are members of our guild, the Vermont Modern Quilt Guild, as well as Champlain Valley Guild. So you don't have to be one or the other. It is a huge genre, and you can cross lines, but this is Karen's quilt, which you can see she's using very large color blocking techniques, definitely vibrant. This quilt is by June Shen Epstein. She's a member of our guild. This is actually based on a basic drunkard's path, which is a traditional block, but the pattern she used invokes really bold colors.
Terrific.
This is also by June, and this is just playing with half square triangles, and she just used a really wide variety of very modern fabrics.
Okay, and we got one more?
There's a couple more in here.
Okay.
This is a small table runner by Britt Richardson, and she was just playing improvisationally, meaning she didn't use a pattern. She just put it together, and it looks like birch trees to me.
It does.
This quilt is by Rachel Arnold, and this is her feminist quilt. So if you look carefully, this is actually spelling out feminist. It's quilted in the background, and was her response to those who sometimes feel feminism can be not a dirty word, but they don't like to admit they're a feminist. And so this was her take on it, and she even has feminist written binary, which I don't understand, but I love it.
Terrific.
And the last couple we have is this is by Karen Lowry Reed. She did some hand stitching. It was from a Carolyn Freelander workshop, beautiful hand stitching and then machine quilted. And then just an improvisational color block by Britt Richardson. She was just playing around with color, just grabbing fabrics that go together and not using as much of a pattern. And then Rachel Arnold did a plus quilt, which is a very popular pattern right now, using very modern color blocking.
Those are terrific. We have to actually move along to the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is the challenge quilt.
There you go.
What have we got here?
This is my quilt that happened to win the challenge. We had 16 members of the guild do something having to do with jazz music.
Fantastic.
And this is my version of it that won our voting.
And we got a couple of things we want to show here too.
More beautiful quilts from Carla White. And this is called Danville Barn, and this is a landscape quilt. And these are often done from a photograph, and this one was done from a photograph.
That's wonderful. Next.
And we also have another landscape quilt by Carla, and this is called 10,000 Islands. I'll get that right side up. This is a technique called thread painting on it, where you use your thread and your sewing machine to lay in a lot of color, almost like a painter.
Great.
And a couple more beautiful landscape quilts from Carla. You have a beachscape here with hand-painted fabrics. And then certainly inspired by Vermont, we have Campbell's Hump here in this landscape in Lake Champlain, and kind of a whimsical touch with the Lady of the Lake here, which was a theme from a prior quilt show. And again, along the whimsical theme is Magical Creatures by Carla White. Again, very three-dimensional, hand-painted techniques, adding things on that really give it a kind of a textural and a tactile
I love that
quality. Yeah.
And this one.
And last, again, this is a Carla White quilt called Tranquility. And as Anya mentioned, quilting can be very simple. This is actually a pretty simple quilt to make. And she's just done a lovely job using hand-painted fabrics and technique called applique here.
It's amazing the different kinds of quilts that you've brought to show us. Thank you so much. The Champlain Valley Quilt Guild's 33rd Quilt Show starts this Friday, October 21st, runs through Sunday, October 23rd at the Champlain Valley Expo in Essex Junction. For more information, check the website on your screen. It's cvqgvt.org. Now, the quilt show will be adjacent to a rug hooking show called Hooked in the Mountains. That show is another example of some of the high-quality fiber art made locally. Laura, this is a great place to be a quilter, huh?
It is, it is. You know, Vermont has such a rich tradition of arts and handcrafts, And you know, we're certainly inspired by beautiful surroundings, and we're also very close to things like the Vermont Quilt Festival, what happens in June, and Shelburne Museum that has both antique quilts and modern quilts on exhibit. So it's a great place to be here, and we're excited to be here. Thank you so much for having us on this show.
You're welcome. It's
Yeah.
a treat.
Thanks.
That's our
Thanks.
program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.